All right, well, maybe we should kick this off just a minute or so early. It looks like we've got a good amount of people attending right now. So, hello everyone. I'm Alex Ross of Rossware. Welcome to Rossware's very first webinar. We've done lots of webinars in the past, but we've never hosted one ourselves, so this is pretty exciting for us. This being our first one, we were expecting it to be, we were expecting the attendance to be pretty small because it's just the first time we're ever doing this. But we've had a ton of registrants, and it already looks like a lot of people have shown up, which is awesome. We're wanting to do a cadence of doing one of these webinars at least every several months, aiming for maybe once a quarter. But if popularity demands it, we might be doing even more than that. So today, our service desk expert, Carrie Sevigny here from Clear Learning Group, she's going to be teaching about the fundamentals of financials in Service Desk. And throughout this webinar, she already mentioned it, but Zoom has a built-in Q&A feature. It should be a button labeled Q&A down at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to submit questions to us. Some of the questions, it might make sense to wait until the end of the webinar for them to be answered, but we do have Casey Putvin of our awesome support team here, and he is probably going to be fielding some of the questions in text while Carrie is presenting, and he can direct some of the questions to Carrie if necessary and if that makes sense in the moment. At the end, I believe there's going to be an open Q&A to answer any questions that hadn't been answered yet. And yeah, but we've just got one short hour, so without further ado, I'm excited to hand things over to Carrie, who will be guiding us through this topic. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Welcome in, everybody. It's nice to have you all here. It's nice to be able to have this opportunity to talk with everybody in between conventions. So we did decide that we were going to do this particular topic on something that we don't normally address at a convention. So everybody can get some information on a topic that we don't normally address. This is also based off of some real-time experience that I've had working with clients, working with users who have had some hiccups and stumbled onto some things where we want to make sure that anybody else doesn't fall into the same pitfall that some clients have. So we're going to talk about fundamentals in finance in Service Desk, specific to payment application and processing. So specifically, if we're going to just jump right in, the components of the financial system in Service Desk are what we're going to talk about first, just so people understand what those are. And so when you go into your funds control management, that's going to be your control F9, is where you're going to be able to access any payments that have come into your system. So that's going to be payments that have been accessed by Rossware Pay. Those are going to be things that have come into your system by checks or cash. This is also going to be electronic funds, so EFTs, and parts credits. So again, this is access via control F9, and this is going to be your funds control management. This is where most of the things you guys are doing relating to money is going to happen. The next location in Service Desk that I feel like a lot of people don't know about or don't understand what its purpose is the applications journal. This is accessed via Alt F9, and we're going to talk more about what this particular function and form area of the financial system is used for as we move along. The next section is going to be the sales journal. So the sales journal, you're probably familiar with that form. It's the purple form, which is accessed via F9. So if you're executing sales or you're closing job records, you're going to go into the sales journal, and you're going to enter the information pertaining to the service call, the parts that are used, etc., that goes into the system. So that's where the system is going to learn about what your total sales were and how much tax you owe. And in order to review that information that you've put into that particular little form, the F9 form, that is going to be managed in the Shift F3, which is a review of that sales journal. Next, you've got your accounts receivable records. Those are accessed via F3 is the shortcut for your AR records. AR records are created in the system when you do a sales journal entry, and you have a shortage. In other words, the customer owes you money at the time that the job is closed. So those are going to go into the system as a pay code 2, and an accounts receivable record is going to be created. And finally, we have the errors and discrepancies accounts. The EDA account is probably a part of the system that people either don't understand or don't utilize or run across on accident when they've made a mistake, and the system offers to create an EDA account. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those are for and how we would want to use those to properly manage our funds. So the big part, funds management. So what is funds management for? Funds management is for collecting money and making sure that those deposits and whatnot get put into the bank and go to their proper endpoint. So where can you collect money in ServiceDesk? You can collect money in ServiceDesk at prepayment. So before you even go out to do service, you can do it at a point of sale. So if a customer comes in to purchase a part from you or to drop off an appliance for a shop job, at time of service, of course, when the technician is in the customer's home, and then finally after service, but before the job is closed. So before the job is closed, before we've created an AR record, because after we've created an AR record, we're going to handle funds a little bit differently. So in these 4 different places where we can collect money, the first option that we have is a prepayment, and this would be a manual prepayment. So if you are in a job record, F7, and you click on the Enter Funds Received button at the bottom of the screen, you have an opportunity to take a credit card from a customer over the phone, and you can process that payment and apply it to their job record. This might be in the cases of, I know that there's a lot of people that are starting to reach out to their customers and basically get a deposit on a service call to limit no-shows and to show commitment to having the service done, or because maybe it's just easier than having their technicians have to worry about collecting that money in the home. So you can do it in ServiceDesk in advance by going to your job record, clicking on Enter Funds Received, and then entering in this funds control that opens that you're going to be processing a bank card. And then whether you're using Rossware Pay, which of course we recommend, or a different processor, you can go ahead and you can enter the credit card payment into the system and have it be applied to the job. Now, if you are using Rossware Pay, you do have the advantage that you can actually ask the customer to make this payment online instead of having to have your staff access that customer's credit card information. What just happened? Oh, David Lang raised his hand. So basically with the Rossware Pay, what you can do here, you're going to right click on the Enter Funds Received button from the job record, and you're going to have the opportunity here to request an online payment or invite the customer to create a stored card online where it's in a secure location. So anybody who has currently been recording transactions to or saving credit cards within the system, we really want you to get away from that. That's long been something that violates regulations for secure credit card storage. And so that's one of the big pushes of Rossware Pay's enabling this option to be able to create stored credit card information, is because we know that when you're dealing with landlords or other situations, that you need to be able to have credit cards on file. And so this option allows you to do that securely. The next option you have here is, sorry. So this is what it looks like when you send the prepayment request to the customer. So the notation is added to the job history. So you can see down here, the blue, it says that we sent the invite to the customer for online bill pay. And then when the customer opens up that link that they get, either via email or via text message, it indicates right here who's requesting the payment, what the payment request is for. And when the customer fills this out, they'll get a copy of a receipt that shows them that they made this payment. And of course, this payment is going to be applied to the customer's job record. The next place that we can collect money is at a point of sale. So if we're in the finished forms document and we're doing a counter sale, or what we would want to do is we come into click on this pink button down here at the bottom to receive funds. And then again, that's going to open our funds control management, where we're going to indicate the type of money that we are receiving from this customer. If we're doing a credit card transaction, we can actually have them tap to pay right there in your office, or if you're there, you're accepting check or cash. This is going to be reconciled later in your when you do your POS cash drawer reconciliation. When your technician is in the home, of course, he also has the ability to take payments from the customer, and he should do so. So when he is in the ticket tab on his SC Mobile, he's got this little green payments icon down here. He's going to tap that little green payment icon, which will open up this payment screen where he can go ahead and indicate whether or not he took cash, check, or card, or if he ran a transaction via Rossware Pay. And this is where he's going to be able to indicate the reference. So this will be really helpful for you guys in the office if he indicates like a check number for whatever check he took, so that he can, so in the office, you guys are able to more easily reconcile the information that comes through. And then finally, the last option here would be the post service and collection of funds. And again, this would be another option that's manual, in that you aren't going to have the credit card in hand. You're going to have to manually key the card information in order to take this payment from a customer over the phone. And so the way to do this would be, again, to go into your finished forms document. So that's going to be your Alt F4, and select the ticket that you want to pull up. So presuming that the technician didn't collect funds while he was out in the field and we're following up on that, we would want to choose his mobile ticket. And then once that mobile ticket was loaded, we can see here on this particular ticket, there's a balance due of $128.90. And so then we would click on the Receive Funds button, which is again going to open up that funds control and management, where we can then go ahead and process this customer's credit card. So once we've received these funds, no matter which method we use in order to get the funds to bring it into our system, those funds are going to be notated in the job record. So we can see in this particular job record, there's two instances where funds were received. One was a 1 cent transaction on a bank card. And then down here, we can see via the technician's post-visit report, he collected a $100 check. He included a reference number, which means that we in the office, when we're reconciling our bank statements and we're reconciling our deposit, we'll be able to find that check number and match it back with this particular job. So when this entry is made into the Control F9, we can see here that it's kept track of by the invoice number along with the reference numbers. But in addition to that, an entry is also made into the application journal and into the pre and partial pays. And so we can see here that we've got two entries, and over here on the right-hand side, we have this little notation that says applied on open job. So the question is why is this important? Why is it important that this is applied to an open job, and why do we need to know that? So money that's received prior to a job being recorded to the sales journal is accounted for in the pre and partial job pays in your sales journal. So if you go into F11 and you run your sales report, you're going to see this section here at the bottom that says work out to determine true net money received. And what that means is basically when we run our sales report, it's for the sales that we've handled during a certain amount of time, and the system is going to keep track of that. But not all of that represents cash in hand that we're taking to the bank. And so this workout to determine true net money received is where we're determining how much money did we actually receive during this time period that needs to be accounted for. And so one of those items that's down here is the changes in prepays, meaning that we've taken cash and we've assigned it to a job record or credit, whatever, but we've taken a payment and we've assigned it to a job record, but we haven't closed that job record yet. And so that particular amount of money isn't included in our sales report as far as for money that we've made during the time period. So when we close a job, so this is that purple form we were talking about earlier, the F9 form, When we close a job, and regardless of where we do this or whether or not we manually enter this little line here of code, in case anybody's unaware, this line of code is basically an insertion into a table. And when we look at this line of code here, each of these commas represents a change in columns. And if you want to know what the columns are, you can see them down here at the bottom. So the first column is your tech initials. So that means who is responsible for or accountable for this particular entry into the system, as far as who's going to get credit for it. So if you do counter sales and you give your office staff commission for selling parts across the counter, this initial right here would need to be the initials of your office staff. If you're giving commissions to your technicians, the initials here would be the initials of the technician who was responsible for this particular job and who is going to get the commission for it. And then our next field is going to be the customer name, followed by the invoice number, the merchandise that was sold, which is ServiceDesk's kind of catch-all column for things like shipping and handling, if you guys are using the point of sale insertions. Then you've got parts sold, service call, labor, and then your total. And ServiceDesk takes those 4 fields, merchandise, parts, service call, and labor, and adds those up and subtracts it from the total sold to determine what the leftover amount is, which should be the tax that you've collected. So with all that information in mind, ServiceDesk takes that total and then it references the applications journal to see if there are still funds yet unapplied. So funds that have been applied and accounted for on that job record, but not recorded to the sales journal, which would match, or at least should match, the amount of money that's due on this particular job. So this job has a balance or a total sale of $165.32, but I've only received $100.01 on this particular job from this customer, which means I have a balance due of $65.31. So with that information, with that reference to the applications journal, ServiceDesk is making the determination that this job should be a pay code 2. In other words, we should create a accounts receivable record for it. So again, why is this important? Well, this is important, and this is where I've seen customers kind of get messed up on stuff a little bit, is that the system is only looking in this applications journal when the sales journal entry is made. So the only time it's looking here to determine whether or not there's money to apply to this sale is at the point that we make this entry into F9. So we want to make sure that any money that we're applying to the job is done in the proper order. As long as the job is open, we can go ahead and we can apply money to the funds journal through any of those 4 methods that we talked about earlier. We can do it from the job record itself. We can do it from the technician out in the field. We can do it from the finished forms document. So there's different places where we can go ahead and apply money to a job as long as it's open. But once it's closed, we want to make sure that we're only applying money to accounts receivable records, because once that job is closed, it's no longer in a position where it can accept or that it will account for this particular function where it checks to see if there's any unapplied funds and then apply them to the job. So then the question is, well, okay, well, what about interim sales? So what is an interim sale? So an interim sale is when you have recorded to the sales journal before the job is done. So when might a person do this? A lot of companies will do this for COD work. They will collect the service call up front or at time of service. And then if the customer is going to proceed with a repair and install parts or whatnot, what they will do is they will do an interim sale where they will record just the service call to the sales journal so that the technician can go ahead and get commission on that service call. And then in 2 weeks, or hopefully less, when you are able to go back and install those parts, and close and complete that job, then we will make a second entry into our pay code, into our sales journal, where the technician would go ahead and get the rest of the commission, and the remainder of the sale would be entered into the system. So one thing to make sure that you're doing, if you are doing interim sales, or you're making those partway through the process, is that you'd want to use this option down here at the bottom to refrain from closing job. We would want to not have ServiceDesk mark the job as closed and recorded to the sales journal. Because one, if you don't mark this refrain from closing job when you do this interim sale process, ServiceDesk is going to yell at you, especially if there's parts that have been ordered. ServiceDesk is going to be like, hey, there's parts that are on order that you haven't accounted for, and there's this going on, and there's all these things that are happening that ServiceDesk is going to be like, hey, what are you doing? So when you mark this refrain from closing job, it tells ServiceDesk, hey, we want to make a sales entry to account for X dollars, but we're not going to, we're not done with this job yet. We just want to make this middle of the job recording. The other thing that you would want to do is, if you're doing these interim sales, we would typically recommend that you don't do this for pay code 2s. In other words, if you're doing warranty work, we would typically not recommend that you try to pay your technician for warranty work before the job is done. Partly it's because you have to bill for that, and you've only got the one dispatch ID number, usually the one claim that you can make the claim on. And it, from an accounting perspective, it gets really messy and confusing if we're trying to create interim pay code 2s where we've got more than one accounts receivable record for a particular job when it's not finished. Now, we can have the split ARs at the end of a job when it's closed, you know, if you're going to have more than one payer, or maybe you're in a situation where we're splitting ARs between parts credits and service call and labor. But for the sake of, hey, we're going to pay the technician for a service call fee partway through the job, we wouldn't want to do that for warranty jobs and build jobs, because in that case, we're looking at a job that's the whole thing, and we would really want to wait until after that whole job was completed and we filed our claim before we went ahead and made that pay code 2 entry. So speaking of pay code 2 entries, let's talk about accounts receivable records. So payments, so once we have a job that's been recorded as a pay code 2 and we have this accounts receivable record, we're going to apply payments to the ARs in one of two ways. Either somebody's going to send us a check, or they're going to send us an EFT or whatever, and we're going to go into our funds control, so our control F9, and we're going to choose this top option here, receive payments and apply to ARs. Or if you're using Rossware Pay, you can actually invite the customer to go online and pay the bill themselves. So this would be something that you might want to do. Maybe the technician went out and the customer wasn't home, and he went ahead and completed the service and left, and he didn't collect funds. And this isn't somebody that you would normally bill, but you need to go ahead and create the AR record, and then you invite the customer to, hey, we know you had an emergency and you had to leave, whatever the situation was, can you go ahead and click here and pay your bill online? Again, the customer, if you send them a text or whatever, they'll get that nice little payment thing that says that it's coming from your company and what the purpose of the payment is for. And then after they pay that online, they're going to get a receipt. So they've got all that information that, hey, I paid this AR, and they're good to go. But for everybody else, oh, here's a little notations. You can see right here, we sent the invite from the customer, or to the customer right here. There's a little notation. And then in the job record, we can see that we recorded or received an online payment of $133.97, and the job is fully paid. So when you do send that invitation to the customer to pay their bill online, it fits really neatly right into your job record and right into your process. But for everybody else, for the warranty jobs, for the property managements of the company, or property management companies of the world that we're billing and we're sending payments out to, for those, we're going to go into our funds management, so our control F9. We're going to click on this receive payments and apply to ARs. And then we're going to tell the system what kind of fund we're receiving. Did we receive a check, or was it cash, or parts credits, or electronic funds? What did we get? Then we're going to follow the prompts at the bottom of the screen by entering the name of the paying party. Then we're going to want to enter a check or a reference number so we know what particular thing that they've so we can reconcile it later for our bank deposit. We're going to again enter the amount of the payment, and then we're going to be prompted to enter the actually, let me step back a second. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to enter the amount of the payment right here. And then once we do that, we can see that this is added here into the system at the top of the screen. But we've got this little 000 here. So there's no reference right here to the invoice number that we're applying this payment to. The system is just saying, okay, cool, I've got this payment for X amount of dollars. Now the next step is what am I doing with this? So the next step here would be to enter the invoice number that it should be applied to. And so in this case, we only have the small amount of $109.95, and we're just going to apply this to a single record. We're going to apply this to invoice number 143. And when we do that, ServiceDesk pops up and shows us the accounts receivable record that we've indicated we want to make the payment on, and asks if this is the correct accounts receivable record. And assuming that it is, we're going to go ahead and click A, and the system is going to move forward. If something here was wrong and we needed to adjust it, we could go ahead and do that here. And then ServiceDesk would make an entry into our sales journal. So into that Shift F3, it would make a corrective entry either to the positive or the negative, depending on how we adjusted this. So for example, this check that the customer wrote us was for $109.95. Although we only billed the customer for $109. So there's two things you could do with this. You could either create an EDA for that extra 95 cents, or we could just come into here and we could adjust this service call fee to $109.95 to account for that extra amount of money that the customer wrote us a check for. Or you could write the customer a check for 95 cents and send it back to them. There's a couple different things you could do to handle this. But if you were going to go ahead and modify this right here on the fly, you would go click here on the option M, and then you would go ahead and edit this information, save this accounts receivable record, and then move forward with applying funds to this particular record. And then, of course, the last option there is no, I'd better look again. And that would be if we typoed the invoice number or somehow we pulled up the wrong one. So once we have confirmed the accounts receivable record, we're going to go ahead and indicate how much of the payment that we received. So we received $109.95. How much of that should be applied to the selected accounts receivable record? In this case, ServiceDesk is making the assumption that we're going to pay this AR in full. So the balance was $109. And so it's showing us that, and we're going to go ahead and we can just go ahead and hit enter to record and say of that $109.95, we want to apply $109 to this AR. So when we do that, what we find is that ServiceDesk keeps track of how much money we've been applying and which accounts receivable records we've been applying money to. And that is information that's going to go into that applications journal. So in this case, we see right down here at the bottom in this blue section, we've got that we applied $109 and it was applied from the check. This account record is now paid in full. And we've recorded this to the sales journal. And of course, that we have this 95 cents that's still unapplied. So our next step in this process would be to go ahead, because we're all done. We've applied all of the money that we can to our accounts receivable records. We're going to go ahead and hit escape to tell ServiceDesk that we're done. And then we're going to confirm that we would like to go ahead and move forward and record this transaction. When we do that, in this particular case, because we have this 95 cents that's just floating out there, ServiceDesk says, hey, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to let it slide? Do you want to go back and fix it? You know, do we want to go back and edit that AR? What do we want to do with this 95 cents? So in this case, we're going to go ahead and indicate that we're going to apply it to an EDA account. So EDAs, errors and discrepancies, are used to track and apply overages and shortages. So, for example, a really good example a few years ago would have been, or actually a good example could be, let's say that you have negotiated a rate increase with your warranty company and you billed them for jobs a month ago, and the rate increase took place 2 weeks ago. And those payments that you are starting to get in are starting to reflect that new payment amount, that new contracted amount, even though you originally billed them at your old rate. So you could adjust those ARs as they come in and correct the rate that you've paid, or you could choose to put that information into an EDA account, and then where it's an overage, and use that money later to either cover shortages where you've billed for, let's say you submitted a payment for $150, and the manufacturer was like, yeah, we're only going to approve 130. So now you've got a $20 shortage. You could take that $20 shortage out of your EDA account and apply it to that AR so that it can get closed and off your books. In this particular case, Happy Paws Dog Grooming is a new client for us. And so we're going to create an EDA account with them, knowing that in the future, we can apply this 95 cents to a future bill that we have from them. So when we do that, we have the option of right here, if this was a future AR, so we put it in here as $108.05. ServiceDesk gives us this little option right here. It shows us that we're short from the amount that is due on the particular accounts receivable record, and it gives us the option to pull that information out of an EDA account. So when we go to apply that $108 or that money, that $108.05 to an open AR record, we would do a shift enter, and then ServiceDesk at the end of the process will prompt us and ask us which EDA do we want to pull this money from. And let me pop back real quick to a slide here. So let's go back to that why is this important slide. So this is another one where why is this important that we're doing that, and why is it important that we're managing those EDA accounts and not letting them just happen when we accidentally make a mistake. And the reason for that is because, again, when we're looking at this true net of money received, ServiceDesk keeps track of those EDA accounts as well. And so what would happen is if you're not accounting for that money, especially if you're using that EDA account to cover a shortage, what's going to happen is when you go to deposit money into your QuickBooks or into your checking account, all of a sudden things are going to start to get out of reconciliation because ServiceDesk is going to pull money out of an EDA, which means this true net of money received is going to go down. And if you're not accounting for that in both places, then over time, your things are going to get out of balance. So the next part of this that we're going to talk about real quick here is managing deposits. So this is probably the other big place where people get kind of where ServiceDesk is giving them warnings, and customers have a hard time figuring out why ServiceDesk is giving them warnings. In fact, a very common warning that we get is this one right here, where ServiceDesk says, hey, you've been warned that you need to clean this up and you haven't done it. The current area size, which is basically a bookmark in the system, is too big. You're going to have all kinds of problems. Do you want us to just wipe this stuff out? And of course, these messages are scary. And so a lot of times customers will just be like, no, and they'll just hit cancel, and they'll keep ignoring this problem until it's to a point where ServiceDesk is like, we can't search your ARs, we can't search your funds journal. You can't process this stuff at all until we just do this blunt edge wholesale cleanup. And so I want to talk about what process you can do to avoid getting this message. So first of all, when we do reconciliation in ServiceDesk, there's three places that you can do reconciliation. The first one is going to be your technicians and the cash drawer. So there's reports in ServiceDesk that are going to give you the tools that you need to make sure that when your technician has said, hey, I collected 5 checks from customers today, that you have a process to go into the system and be like, yes, I have those 5 checks. The next thing is going to be the bank deposits. So this is going to be your reconciliation of credit card batches, your standard bank deposits for cash and for check. So what you want to be able to do is like, okay, well, now I've got 30 checks from technicians. How do I make sure that I have all of those checks here and create a bank deposit? And then finally is going to be your bank statements. And that's going to be a reconciliation of, hey, I sent Susie to the bank last week with 30 checks totaling $15,000. Does my bank reflect that that deposit was made? Did all of the checks that I gave Susie make it to the bank? And did the bank apply all of the funds to the right account? So these are the three places where you're going to have those reconciliations in ServiceDesk, which is going to move that area partition forward and have it so that ServiceDesk isn't yelling at you about things. So the first one is these collection reports. So this is going to be under funds control. So you're going to go into control F9, and then you have an option right here. You can see it what it looks like. You've got these reconciliation worksheets. So you can either do items within a particular date range. So if you're getting bank bags from your technicians and you want to reconcile his last week of checks and cash, you could choose to run this report for a date range, or you can do the items that have not yet been deposited. So you've got two options there, but basically what this report gives you is it gives you a list. Right here you can see where it says totals for Stephanie Calhoun. So we've got a list of each technician and all the jobs that he collected money on. So whether it was cash, check, or bank card, all of that information is going to be in here. So you can go through and reconcile and make sure that all of the checks that he told ServiceDesk that he received, you have in your hands. Next, you're going to have an option here for point of sale. So this is where you can reconcile your cash drawer. The next thing that we have here is when you have those physical checks or that cash in hand, you're going to want to make a bank deposit. So that is going to be again in the control F9. And right here, you're going to go here for other funds. And you're going to choose to assemble a deposit of funds received. With that selection done, once you've selected what kind of fund you're going to handle, you're going to literally just take those physical checks and you're going to find them here in the system. You can either do a search by dollar amount, by invoice number, by check number, or you can eyeball this list and find these items and just right click on them. So you're going to right click and choose these items, and it's going to create this little deposit. So you can see here where it says 10 items marked for $2,886.90. So it's creating this deposit as I go through these particular items. And as we clean these things up, it's going to eventually allow that area partition to be moved forward. This is what the check deposit report looks like. We found over the years that most banks will allow and accept this little listing, so it prevents you from having to hand write out a bunch of check deposits, which is one reason that people really like the e-deposits, is because they get to avoid all of this. Luckily, ServiceDesk makes it really easy for you to do those deposits within the system. The next thing we have here is your bank cards. So if you're doing transactions with Rossware Pay, obviously you have the functionality here to do the automated on-screen reconciliation, where ServiceDesk is matching the reference numbers, it's matching your bank numbers, it's matching your transaction numbers. All of that is here within Rossware Pay. But if you guys are doing something banking outside of ServiceDesk, then you're going to use this same option here that you do for checks and cash. You're going to just choose bank cards here instead of doing the on-screen Rossware Pay reconciliation. And then the final one we have here is EFTs and parts credits. So EFTs and parts credits are a little different because parts credits specifically obviously don't represent cash in your system. They're credits on your bill. And then EFTs are already in your bank. So you don't need to make a bank deposit for EFTs. So you have the option here at the bottom, if you choose EFTs or parts credits, to auto mark those things as processed. So that helps to clean up that system and make sure that, again, that area partition doesn't get so full and over bloated that your system starts yelling at you and your functionality is decreased. So once we have done that whole process and we made those deposits and we've told ServiceDesk, yes, those pieces of money that we collected has actually made it to the bank, the final step in this process would be to go here into your bank statements and go here to the other funds and confirm reception of deposits at bank. And again, this is where you can come into the system and say, okay, so on this date, we deposited checks totaling X amount of dollars. In this case, in this example, these are all single deposits, but if there was more than one, it would say 10 checks deposited, and then it would have that amount of $2,800. And then if you wanted to, you could always go back into the individual view edit, and you could go and you could see what checks made up that batch of 10 that was deposited on that particular day. So the last thing we're going to talk about here before we get to questions is security. Since we've shown you all these different places where you can manage funds, I'm sure that you can see and think about all the different places where people could go in and make edits and change things and really throw your money and your financials off. And so when you go into ServiceDesk into your security form, that's going to be your Shift F11. That's where you're going to see these different options for setting security for your funds journal, for your sales journal, and for your accounts receivable records. So there's a whole bunch of different places that you guys can password protect and make sure that only the people who should be in your system messing around with these different functions in the system are allowed to do so. So real quick, I want to go back to, let me, hold on a second. This function. So I also want to just point out, we don't have time in this particular webinar today. However, this control enter option right here, when you're applying payments, will allow you to use an Excel file in order to apply a whole bunch of payments to a bunch of ARs automatically. So in other words, let's say that Whirlpool, actually, let's use Marcone as an example. Marcone sends you a bunch of parts credits, and you would like to apply those automatically to your open ARs. You can do that here with this function if you've got your Excel file set up in the way that ServiceDesk expects it to. So that could possibly be a future webinar if that's something that interests people. But basically, it prevents the process where the system goes through and asks you about every single one of these ARs. If it's able to make an exact match between the information that's in your Excel file and the amount due on the particular AR, it'll just go ahead and automatically apply the funds to the AR. And then you'll only have to manage through this process the particular accounts receivable records that aren't that don't have an exact match. And the ones that don't have an exact match, you'll again get this exact same prompt where it says, hey, these ones didn't have an exact match. You're going to have to go through them one by one, and then you'll go through and you'll manage those particular accounts receivables. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to the Q&A. Casey, did you have anybody have any questions? How to do an upload on a big AR balances? Ben, I would love to show that, but that is a process that's going to take a different webinar.
Yeah, the only question that I needed a verification on is available for, if this is going to be available for everybody. I figured it was going to be, and how to obtain the recording afterwards.
I would presume that we're going to put it on our Facebook page.
Perfect, thank you.
or not our Facebook page. I mean, there'll probably be a link to it on the Facebook page, but I meant at YouTube. We'll probably put it on our YouTube page. Anything else that you weren't able to answer, or anything else that all right, Casey, just I just put it in the chat, a link to the payment, the automation of the ARs that I just talked about. There's a link to the article in there that I added. It's kind of cool to see it in person though, so if we can do a webinar on that and share it with everybody. Is there to wipe out? Yes, Denise, if you would like to wipe out the current EDAs, what you're going to want to do, let me share a different screen. Okay, so if you want to wipe out your existing EDAs and start over fresh, what you're going to want to do is you can go to your About ServiceDesk form and then double click right here where it says running from SD, and that'll take you to your SD folder. And there's actually an EDA files folder now where you can find those particular EDAs that are in here. If you want to review them, like I said, you're going to go to your applications journal, and you're going to choose right here to show EDA. And then you can go ahead and click on the EDA and open it, and it'll show you like the running information that's in the EDA. So like like I said, if you made a mistake and you put that information into an EDA, you can manage it there. I think the EDAs, depending on how you're using them, are kind of a nice functionality. Like I think at the end of the year, you could like close them out, maybe rename them and have a new EDA for each year. Because you're applying it, you should be accounting for it in your QuickBooks or in your accounting software. And so let's say at the end of the year, your EDA has built up to let's say $700. It's overpayments and underpayments and whatnot from when you've made claims to GE and whatnot. And so instead of like, just to be clear, so when you make an adjustment to an accounts receivable record, the system will go into your sales view and it will make an adjustment here with the negative information. So positive or negative, whichever way, it'll make an adjustment here, which means it's going to affect your technicians' commissions for whatever time period you make this adjustment, which in some cases is the correct thing to do, right? If you have had to issue a refund, or if you've had to eat the price of a part because the technician made a mistake, it might be the right thing to do to adjust that AR and have that negative entry that's in here. Like right here, we've got this negative entry. It might make sense to have that negative entry affect your technician. On the other hand, you might have extra money and that you don't want to increase the AR record and have that affect your technician. So for example, we'll go back to my example with the contract change, where when you originally billed the job, you billed it at $109 and they gave you a raise, and now your new rate is $119. You may not want to change every single one of these service calls and give that technician that extra commission on that $10. So if you were to put that money into an EDA at the end of the year, you could take that EDA amount that you've set aside and you could go ahead and pull that money out and account for it in your accounting system. Maybe you use that for end of the year bonuses. Maybe you use it for an end of the year Christmas party, whatever you want to do with it. But in that case, you definitely would not want to continue to have that information in the EDA the following year if you've no longer set that money aside in real cash in your accounting program to cover those errors and discrepancies. So hopefully that makes sense in that process. Excel sheet. Crystal, again, we'll try to do is there a way to clean out the old financial data, a deep archive? Patrick, you might have to give us a little bit more information about what you mean about the deep archive of the ARs or the financial data. And David, do you still want to ask a question live? If so, yes, you do. Okay. Where is that at? View. David. Okay. All right, David, you can chat.
I wish I wish I could bring you through this from the beginning. I only really kind of know the ending, and that was that the bank called me up and said, "Hey, we have a $300 check here that we don't see on your register." And I believe that the bank deposit slip that ServiceDesk printed out, I believe there was one entry, I think maybe for the service call, and then a second entry for actual labor that was collected.
Mm,
If you add those two amounts together, it equaled that check, the $300 check. Okay. But they don't want to look through the bank's deposit slip and find the same name, the same invoice, and then add those two amounts together to have it equal that one check. Does that make
right. So, yeah. So what you should be doing in that case, so if you've got more than one job record that you're using a single check for, what you want to make sure that you're doing is, let me see if I can find it. You want to use this option right here, this miscellaneous actions, and you want to divert a portion of an item's application to another job. In other words, you have a single check in your system, right? So in your funds control, if you go and you search for the check number, you're only going to find a single check number, but you're going to move part of that money from one job to another. So what's going to happen is in here, when I go and I view edit items in file and I look at my checks, I'm going to only have a single check. So like this check right here, this 1201, I'm only going to have this single check in here for this amount. But when I do this divert portion of an item from one to another, what it's going to do is in my applications journal, right, in my pre and partial pays, it's going to move money that I have previously applied to an open job number 123. It's going to move it from job 123 and it's going to apply it to job 345. So in my bank deposit, I still have a single check as I should. But in my applications journal, I've appropriately told ServiceDesk, hey, I'm splitting this across multiple invoice numbers. Now that is dependent, and I know that it's Rossware, the SD Mobile doesn't handle this part well yet, in that when your technician goes out and he collects funds on more than one jobs that are linked together, he has to either make a choice and say, hey, I'm collecting money on this invoice but not the other one. Like I realize that it's not a perfect system right now. But that would be the way, that the proper way to handle it here on the backside. How you get there on the front end to make sure that the technicians are putting that information back through correctly for you. I'm not sure what the easiest way to do that would be. It would definitely be something that would be worth like chatting it out amongst ourselves to try to figure out, hey, you can do X, Y, and Z. But the idea of for ServiceDesk, for that specific bank issue that you just described, you're going to want to use this divert portion of items application from one invoice to another. Holly, can you submit a support ticket with that issue? And specifically what message comes up? Reconcile. So, Monique, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but when you go to apply funds, are you talking about applying funds, or are you talking about with when you record to the sales journal? because when you record to the sales journal, so that's going to be your F9 here. If you use this alter date right here, if you choose to do use alter date, then ServiceDesk will backdate these entries in your sales journal to the date that the technician completed the job, rather than the date that you guys actually closed the job. So if you're trying to reconcile stuff based off of those dates, then you'd want to use this option to use altered date. I hope that I hope that splitting the money across tickets in the future is something that ServiceDesk will make easier, especially with the Rossware pay. And we've had people already ask to be able to consolidate multiple appliances in a single house where you can just have that one charge. And Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's something that we're still in process on.
I believe you're right, yeah.
And then let's see here. Nadi, when you've got 2 technicians for commission, are we talking about if we're talking about a COD job, then what you would want to do is you would click on this refrain from closing job, mark it as this entry only, and you would do the first entry for the first technician for the portion that he would get credit for. And then you would go ahead, and after you've recorded that, you would go ahead and do the balance of the job for the second technician. So you'd have 2 pay code 1 entries, one for the first tech and another for the second tech. That is going to prevent, by using this refrain from closing job, that's going to prevent ServiceDesk from yelling at you about things not adding up and whatnot. It's a little bit more complicated when you're talking about accounts receivable records. If you've billed the job, then you're going to want to do the pay code 2 entry, and you don't want to have 2 AR records. So typically the easier way to do that would be to create the first AR record for the first technician, and then you can adjust the service call amount and change the technician's initials right here. And when the system goes to record the change to the AR into the system, it will record the change with the other technician's initials. So then you've got 1 AR, 2 pay code 2 entries into your Shift F3. The problem with that is if you pay technicians on pay code 3s. So if you pay technicians on pay code 3s, you actually need to have 2 pay code 3 entries, not 1, in which case you would have 2 ARs and not only 1. But I don't know which way you pay commissions, and hopefully that doesn't happen very often. David, maybe we can connect later and look at that specific issue. We go into sales journal, reverse a transaction. Ben, I think I might connect up with Donna specifically to look at that particular issue. Okay. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Let's see here. We are going to be at the PSA convention here next month. And we are also going to obviously be at the ASCII convention before too much longer. That's coming up on us sooner than we'd like. So what I would recommend, if you guys aren't already, is if you can follow Rossware's Facebook account. That's going to be where you guys are going to go ahead and see announcements about future webinars and other things we're doing. Additionally, if you want to follow Clear Learning Group's Facebook account, We also have other things that Clear Learning Group is doing. And I would look there for hopefully in the near future. In the near future, we're going to put a survey out, basically, where if you guys can let us know topics that you would like for future webinars, topics that you would like to see at ASTI, at the different conventions, I would really welcome knowing what you guys would like to learn about and the things that are interesting to you, because that makes this more beneficial for everybody. Otherwise, I can stand up here and I can talk about lots of things, but it's not necessarily going to be beneficial to you. Also, if you guys are interested in having Clear Learning Group either do training for you or do an assessment of how your business has been adopting and using ServiceDesk, by all means, reach out to Clear Learning Group and we'll see what we can do to help you out. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to applaud us for keeping this under an hour. And we appreciate all of you guys for being with us, and let us know what we can do, because our goal is to keep helping your businesses grow. Thank you. All right, y'all have a great day.